Alrighty, hey everyone, I'm Warren Frame, and I'm going to be talking about a module called PSDepend. So this is really just a quick way to define, document, and resolve dependencies, whether they're PowerShell modules, Git repositories, or just files from the internet or from Share. You can kind of think of it like a poorly implemented pip install for Python or bundle install for Ruby. So let's dive into a demo. So I've defined a couple variables up ahead, most important ones being this simple example. It's a requirements.psd1 file, and this advanced example out here in like a project folder. So now that those are there, let's go ahead and install PSDepend. You can grab it from the gallery, or there's a way to bootstrap it, or just grab it from GitHub, and you can find that out on the GitHub repo. Once we have the module, we can check the About Help file. There's some content there. We can see what commands are available, and we can check out PSDepend type, which basically says, what can you actually manage with PSDepend? And there's some handy ones like you can pull something from any Git source or from GitHub without the reliance on git.exe. Or you can use PowerShell Get to grab a module from the gallery, or you can use NuGet to grab a module from the gallery, which bypasses that requirement for PowerShell Get. Okay, cool. So let's take a look at a quick, simple example. And actually, I have this up here. So with a simple syntax, we basically have just kind of like a PSD1 file with a hash table where the left-hand side, we parse and figure out, is it a PowerShell gallery module? If it's just a word, and if it has a slash and something on each side, we assume it's a GitHub repo. And if we have a slash and we split on the slash and it's, multiple things, we assume it's a Git repository. Anyways, and the right-hand side for a module is the version with latest grabbing the latest, or empty, just a blank string would grab the latest too. Or you can specify a particular version. And for Git and GitHub, you can specify like a commit, a tag, a branch, a release, that sort of thing. So this is the simple requirements. We can see, what does PSDepend see when we run this? And if you run select star, you'll see more information there. So if you run invoke PSDepend with the -test switch, it will basically say, hey, do these dependencies exist? Assuming that a dependency has implemented the test. In this case, with GitHub, it's kind of hard to test for this. I haven't implemented yet, and I'm not sure if it's something that's going to be possible. So we basically say, no, these modules don't exist, and I can't really test for this dependency that's from GitHub. If we don't trust that, we can just test to see, hey, are the modules there? And nope, they're not. And hey, is Bosch spec out there in my user profile? And it is not. So if I run through the install, and notice how, with up here I ran -test. I don't need to run -install here. It's the default action if nothing else is provided. So that's going to run the thing. Let's see. While this is going, we'll just queue this up. So we're going to run the test again just to make sure it happened. There's no output at the moment, but at some point maybe we'll come up with like a pass-through switch or something. And again, we skip that particular GitHub dependency, and we see, hey, those modules are there. And if we actually check for the modules, yep, and the PS Slack one where we actually specify the version is correct. And we can also see that, hey, Bosch spec is out there. So that's it. That's just a really simple way to say, hey, I want this particular module at this version, this GitHub repo with this commit or this branch or whatever. It's quite handy. If you've used other languages, you've probably found out that requirements on different versions of modules is very important. And if you don't manage it, things can and will break. In the PowerShell world, we will probably find that out very soon if you haven't already. All right, so let's take a look at an advanced dependency, or not advanced, but a little more complex. So with this syntax, instead of just having a string on each side, right, like a normal key and value, we're going to have the key as what it was before, and the value is actually going to be another hash table. Where you can spend the dependency type. You can specify the dependency type. Here I'm specifying a source. I can mix and match the old simple syntax in here. And I can actually specify some global options. So for every single one of these options down here where I don't override it, and I don't do that here anywhere, I want the target of a particular dependency folder, and I want to add to the path. And you're probably wondering, why is this in a single quote? Basically, we handle the expansion of a couple variables. You can read more in this little about file. Anyways, so if I run this, it should grab, a couple modules, this GitHub repo, and this file, and toss it all in the folder containing this requirements file. that was a mouthful. Okay, so we're going to run a test again, and we're going to see, hey, nope, we don't have those. And we can test the folder just to make sure, and all it has is that requirements file. So we're going to run through the install, it's going to pull things down, and we're going to run the test again. This time we're going to throw a quiet switch on there. It's kind of like test path. Basically, if all of the dependencies that it could test for exist, it will come back as true, and it did. And this one it skipped, so it still assumes true. All right, and we see that we have the 3 modules and the GitHub repo and the file, and they are all there. It's pretty cool. And you notice the add to path directive that we specified in the global parameters? That basically says, hey, if it's something like a file or a GitHub repo where you don't really know if it's a PowerShell module, it's going to throw it in $env path. It's going to prepend it. And if it's like the PowerShell gallery, we know it's a PowerShell module, so we're going to throw it in the PS module path. And again, we prepend it. So why might you need that? This is nowhere near handling virtual environments, but it's kind of like a light way to do this where, if you prepend that module path, then presumably if you have multiple modules on a system, it will use that module because it finds it first. It's kind of just a handy way to do that. And you can actually import modules as well if the dependencies support it. I didn't show it here. Another reason for this is, maybe for your coworkers. I know in the past I've had a number of coworkers who weren't really too familiar with PowerShell, despite my continuous pestering. But anyway, so I would have to be like, hey, here's this cool function, but hey, you have to, go install this module, that module, and maybe pull down this file. With PSDepend, I can just give them a little requirements file and a really small snippet of code that pulls down those dependencies for them, instead of like hard coding it in the function. And finally, I think the most important thing is, as PowerShell gets more and more mature and the PowerShell gallery matures, we're going to come up with breaking changes to different modules, and we're going to keep abstracting things out and building on top of modules. So having consistent versioning and gating these versions for modules is going to be very important. So that's it. That was PSDepend. If you want to find out more, there's a repo out there on GitHub. There's a silly blog post, and if you have any questions, hit me up on Twitter or on GitHub. And if you have any, you run into any bugs, I know there are plenty. You have any questions, just hit me up. It'd be great. So I think that's it.